that's kind of the process, the entire process, right? Observation, feeling, need, request. And we kind of covered all of this. Um, kind of the first, essentially, nonviolent communication, you'd use it in situations where you would want to express yourself in a way where you want somebody to either continue the behavior that they're doing because it does meet your needs or change their behavior because it doesn't meet your needs. And essentially, it's a lot of self-awareness. And then the nonviolent communication also teaches kind of the method in which you can facilitate the conversation with the person. Whereas our current kind of conversational style that we've become accustomed to doesn't really do that. It more so is concerned with, blaming, judging, um, kind of, you know, seeing things and calling them out. And we have never really been taught the, not the necessarily the correct way to communicate, but a way to communicate that facilitates that empathy and that compassion and that understanding from the perspective of where the other person is coming from, versus like this judgmental zone that we find ourselves in more, frequently. So delete the browser here. But yeah, we talked about observation versus evaluation, kind of how to separate those two things. Observe without evaluating is one of the hardest things to do in the human language specifically, because what you want to do is you want to tell the person what they're doing specifically without associating any kind of judgment alongside with it, right? So it's not, you know, it's not like, for example, there's one example, Doug procrastinates is not an observation without an evaluation. You're evaluating Doug on what he does, right? You're not saying what Doug is doing specifically. Doug, a way to make Doug procrastinates more specific, more observant versus evaluating would be Doug only studies for exams the night before. Where that kind of leads into depends on where the conversation goes, but that was kind of last session's specific topic. This session specific topic is mostly going to be feelings and how to kind of identify them and also how to express them effectively, because our language doesn't really teach us how to do that, and not English, but specifically the human language that we have come to learn and come to use more often than not. A lot of the times we'll say things like, I feel that, or I feel you, or I feel like, or I feel as if, and then you follow it with something that to you in the moment, when you do express it that way, seems like a feeling, and you think it is a feeling. But a lot of the times when you phrase the sentence in that manner, the thing that follows, I feel that, or I feel like, or I feel as if, is not really a feeling. For example, I feel as if you don't give me enough time of the day, whatever, right? You don't spend enough quality time with me, right? That's not how you feel. That's how you're evaluating whoever you're talking to's behavior and what they're giving to you, right? How you feel might be sad or anxious or depressed. Other times, you might feel happy when people aren't giving you time, right? When you really are feeling solitary and you want some time to yourself and you want to read a book or you want to play a video game by yourself or whatever, people aren't giving you that time. That might be a positive thing, right? So it really depends on the self-aware perspective of where you're coming from and understanding, okay, right now, these are my needs that aren't being met, and what feelings are kind of bubbling up from those needs, and how can I better express those feelings in a way where the other person's going to understand, and they're not going to think I'm attacking them, and they're not going to think I'm judging them, and they're not going to think the feelings are the other person's responsibility, right? NVC kind of goes through this process that teaches you to take responsibility for your feelings, and I think that that's really important. That's kind of, we have ignored that entirely in the way that we talk. So kind of right off the bat, what I mentioned before, I feel followed by that, like, as if, followed by pronouns. I feel you, I feel she, I feel mom, I feel dad, I feel, my boyfriend, whatever. Followed, and then you say whatever it is that is going to follow that. More often than not, that thing is not going to be a feeling. So it's important to kind of catch yourself in those instances and be like, okay, am I really saying something that I feel? And I'm guilty of this as well. I say, oh, I feel like you're not giving me enough attention or whatever. And that's not what I'm feeling. I'm feeling sad because of something that you're doing, but I'm not feeling like you're giving me enough attention. I think that you're not giving me enough attention. And our language kind of has tricked us into thinking that that's actually how we feel. And we hide behind those feelings a lot of the times, and in reality, they're not feelings at all. They're observations of what the other person is doing, and they're kind of judgments on what the other person is doing. Um, and what we think others are doing around us is not a feeling. So that's kind of the whole point of the module, is to really drive the point home of, you know, sometimes it's going to be difficult to kind of be introspective and be like, okay, what am I really feeling? Sometimes it's going to be really scary. Sometimes it's going to be incredibly hard to turn inward and to be that introspective, self-aware individual that says, hey, I'm trying to understand what I'm feeling. I'm really trying to express it in a positive manner. But just because it's difficult doesn't mean it's not worth doing in the long term, especially if you're trying to facilitate a better communication pathway with whoever you're talking to. Um, so, um, a lot of the modules examples that they go on and give is um, a lot of the things that people say that they feel, but in reality they don't. So some really common examples: I feel misunderstood. Again, that's not a feeling. That's you observing other people and thinking that they don't understand you, right? Assessment of others' understanding is not a feeling. You might feel anxious, annoyed, frustrated, whatever it is, right? And it's important to kind of go deep below that. Exactly, Joe. I feel myself saying that a lot as well, um, because that's kind of how we've been coded to say, right? I feel that you didn't do this. I feel that this, that, and the other. I feel that, and in reality, feel needs to be swapped with the word think or observe or something, because in reality, it's not how we're feeling. And what we're doing is we're actually selling our feelings short, because what our feelings are more important than our observations. I would, I feel pretty comfortable in saying that, even that's not the real feeling. I think pretty comfortable in the sense that I is very comfortable in saying that the feeling is kind of the thing that bubbles up from the surface of the need, and it's more important to get there than it is to kind of judge and understand, or kind of, what am I looking for here? Um,
It's
what's the
important
word I'm looking?
to be able to identify
Yeah, no, exactly.
the difference between things that are out of your control and in your control, especially in regards to your emotions. So, like
Exactly,
when you're
because all you
talking
can do is
about,
just say something, right? So
yeah, when you're talking about, I feel like you don't spend enough time with me. Well, that's something that you can't control. So it's something that you should be filtering out and not worrying about, because you can't force someone to spend time with you. Instead, it's important to identify. So basically, like one thing my therapist has gone through with me multiple times is that your feelings start with a thought. And so it's important to identify the thought. And if the thought is, oh, they're not spending enough time with me, then understanding, I guess, in regards to that thought, what part of it you can take responsibility for, but also what can you control it. And if you can't control it, that's something that needs filtered out. But if you want to spend time with someone, or you want, if you have a need that needs to be met, being able to convey that need needs to be provided outside of blame. Instead of approaching it with I feel like you don't spend enough time with me, it should be like, I would be happier, or it would make me happy if we could take this day to spend time together, or something along
yeah.
those lines.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, instead of identifying that thought as the feeling, understand that that thought leads to the feeling, and then
Right.
own your responsibility for your own feelings, and then being able to convey that feeling, but also convey the need without, I guess, sparking an argument or approaching it from a perspective that it's someone else's fault that you're feeling a certain way. Now, for
Exactly.
some people, and this is why this topic came up with me, some people who suffer from severe depression or anxiety, or maybe even anger issues, may have an actual chemical imbalance in their brain, and may have no thoughts leading to these feelings. So if you're getting like really sad or upset or angry, but there's not a thought that led to that, or a reason that led to that feeling, it just happens, then there's a chance or more likelihood that there's a chemical imbalance, and that would be a point where you'd be approaching not only professional help but medication to help you with that, which um, it's not a bad thing to need that, but it's also there's a distinct, especially with depression, there's a distinct difference between being sad and within reason and having a lot of things that are, you know, providing or provoking this sadness, or thoughts that are provoking this sadness. Whereas if nothing's happening and there's no thought towards it or anything, you're just sad, and you're just sad and there's no controlling it and there's no getting out of it, then that's a point where you need to recognize that there may be something going on in your brain that you can't control, and the only thing that you can do is get the help that you need in that retrospect. So when you're meeting your needs in nonviolent communication, let's say you're suffering from that depression and someone comes up to you and is like, hey, like, you're feeling depressed on a regular basis and I can't do anything to fix it or help it or make it better. And you can't convey a need at that point, because if there's no thought leading to it, if it's not, oh, you're not spending time with me, or, oh, well, this happened, you know, like my dog died, and so since my dog died, now I'm going through something and that's why I'm sad. If there's nothing that's causing it and you aren't able to convey those needs, then that's when you got to have the fine line of you know, seeking out that help professionally with a psychiatrist and figuring out if there's some sort of medication you can take to help with any chemical imbalance you may have or anything like that. So and there is no, like, most people don't suffer, or most people do suffer from it this way. Everyone suffers from depression in a different retrospect, but what we're attacking today, or what we're talking about today, is the step of taking responsibility for those feelings, but then also knowing how to convey those feelings in regards to approaching your needs, whether it be in times where you need comfort, or if it could be your significant other or family member or friend or whatever, being able to convey, hey, this happened and I've been thinking about it and I am feeling. So when you say I feel like this and this and this and this, instead of saying I feel like, you should just know that there's emotions. I think there's like 27 like official labeled emotions, whether it be like frustration or stressed or whatever it may be. But being able to just say I feel sad, or I feel angry, or I feel frustrated, or whatever it may be, that would be how you'd approach talking about how you feel, as opposed to saying I feel like you did this, which made this happen.
Right, yeah, because at that point you're shifting blame and you're shifting the burden of the feeling onto the other person, or at least that's kind of the way it's coming off in your language. And the other person, unless they are also very good at nonviolent communication, a lot of people will kind of repel, and they'll be like, "Whoa, man! Like, I didn't mean to do that, and this, that, and the other," and suddenly you're going down a tangent, you know. So Joe says, "I think we avoid talking like that because our sounds more selfish, feeling like you're not getting enough attention and knowing that you just want more attention doesn't really sit the same way with yourself." Yeah, no, I agree. I think that there's definitely kind of underarching reasons why we've formed the language that we've formed. A lot of that I think has to do with power structure and getting people to do things that you want them to do. You know, obviously not in a friendly familial setting, but you know, throughout history, I think that's kind of where our language came from. Kind of what NVC, you know, what casuals kind of, you know, getting at is NVC kind of teaches you that connection between your feelings and your needs. And sometimes there isn't one, kind of like what he said, is sometimes there is a requirement for a chemical imbalance to be righted through medicine or through therapy or through both. But a lot of the times it's kind of getting to that feeling and getting to the root of that feeling, because once you uncover that feeling, you realize, oh, I have this unmet need that I have. And wouldn't it be wonderful to, or at least that's the premise of nonviolent communication, wouldn't it be wonderful to come up to another person with this platter in front of you and say, hey, I feel sad or anxious or depressed because my need for affection or connection or autonomy or solitude or whatever that need is that you've done the work yourself to figure out and to unearth isn't being met. Can you do this to augment your behavior so that maybe in the future or even right now, that need is going to be met of mine. Um, so a lot of the times, the I feel and then followed by some way that you think or some way that you've evaluated is not the way to go. You want to kind of dig deeper. Um, you need words that refer to specific emotions. Um, and in that kind of offshoot of that is you also want to avoid words that are really vague as well. Specific emotions, meaning, um, happy is kind of on the median there. Good is way too general. Bad is too general, right? You want to sit there and kind of introspect and turn inward and you know allow that stuff to kind of bubble up to the surface and realize truly how you're feeling. Because if you communicate it in the best way that you could to the other party, and you say, "Hey, these are the ways that I'm feeling," and you could even not know, right? And that's fine as long as there's like an empathetic, compassionate string between you guys and you guys are trying to understand each other from a good place. I don't think anybody's going to get mad or anything. So even if you approach the conversation in a way that you kind of haven't nailed down the feelings, but you just know that you feel bad, um, maybe there's some work to do on your side there to kind of really unearth what you're feeling. But I think it's better to start there than it is to start. I feel as though, uh, you misunderstood me, or I feel as though you don't spend enough time with me, or I feel as though she didn't listen to me when I said this thing, right? It's much better to approach that conversation with that specific emotion in mind, and where there couldn't be a specific emotion, even a general emotion in mind, right? Even if you couldn't really understand kind of to get to the surface, you still know that you feel kind of icky. You still know that you feel kind of bad, or good, whatever. Nonviolent communication doesn't necessarily have to be in a bad sense. We just kind of use it because it's very applicable in a situation where you'd want somebody to change their behavior. Um, Even if you come to the situation with, hey, I feel poorly, and I don't really know beyond what I feel other than poorly, there still is a link there intrinsically to a need. And I feel as though if you tug on that thread or that string long enough, if you sit there in the feeling and you introspect and you become a little self-aware about what is going on, I feel as though it'll that string will kind of loosen and you'll get to the end of it. And at the end of that string on the other side of the feeling is the need that was the chain reaction to make you feel that way. Because at the end of the day, the feelings is just a way for us to communicate to the other party of what need of ours isn't being met. Somebody who's really good at nonviolent communication might be able to skip the feeling part entirely. Whether that's a good practice or not is a different story. But a lot of people who are very good at it can say, hey, I know my need here isn't being met. And I know why I'm depressed or I'm sad or I'm anxious or I'm frustrated or whatever it is. Um, so it's tough. I'll say that it's tough because our language is so coded and we are so trained throughout our life to just not take responsibility for our feelings because that's essentially what that invokes. The way that we communicate. I feel that she, I feel that her, I feel that he, I feel that you, I feel that I feel misunderstood, I feel judged, I feel unwanted, rejected, put down, whatever. A lot of that stuff, you're putting the burden of proof on, or not the burden of proof, but the burden of the emotion on the other person. You're saying, I feel this in not as many words as you're making me feel that. And in reality, it's not they're making you feel anything. They're doing something and it may cause a chain reaction in you. And then as a result, you feel something. But it's important to kind of distinguish between those two things and be like, listen, there's a part of this that I own. There's a part of this emotional landscape that I take ownership for and I should own because it is mine. Um, and the NVC kind of teaches you to flourish in that sector, and the feelings module is really just a connector module between the feeling itself and the need. Because at the end of the day, we follow the rope down, and at the end of the rope is a need that's unmet. So Ramsey
So
says definitely tough because a lot of people can view it as neediness when what you're trying to do is communicate your emotions and needs. No, 100%.
okay,
And I
so
feel like, yeah.
touching base on that, what Ramsey just said, and then also
Hmm.
Peyton said, I wish I could do that. I always end up hating myself for upsetting my boyfriend because I was in a bad state of mind and let it affect how I spoke to him / treated him. So I think essentially with issues like this, basically, and this goes for almost anything mental health wise, or whether you're suffering with addiction or whatever it may be. The first step in bettering yourself in these kinds of practices is identifying the problem, or identifying what it is. So like a lot of people struggle to communicate their emotions. For example, me, one of my biggest struggles with communicating my emotions is my entire life I would kind of wear my emotions on my sleeve. Like people would know what I'm feeling, but I wouldn't show why. Maybe it was a pride thing. Maybe it was I felt no one would care if I did share why. I don't, but a lot of my, especially with sadness, a lot of those emotions I would retreat inside of myself with, and then I would take that into my own imagination. And if I didn't take that and release it in a healthy expression like music or writing, then it would just sit in my brain and I'd let my imagination run wild, which was like really unhealthy. And so there's a really distinct difference between how I would react in words when it did finally come out, if I let it pile up inside, or as opposed to releasing it in a healthy way through my art. So I find that like when I write stuff, even if it's just poetry, or if I put it into music, it's easier for me to talk about later. Some other people have different ways of outletting that feeling, because a lot of people like to keep it inside of them. Some people have a fear of hurting someone else in expressing their emotions, or
Yep.
Not wanting that to burden someone else. Some people have lived their entire lives under emotional abuse, where it may be your parents, it may be your friends or your siblings or whatever, but they're just dismissing your emotions when you do try to approach them. And so you have this built-in mentality that nobody's ever going to care about what you feel or what you think, and so there's no point in approaching it.
Right.
There's different
common.
struggles. There's a lot of different struggles. So identifying that struggle is a really big part, and then being able to overcome that in a way. It's kind of like how when I have so many of these meetings with Raz, and if you're one of the people that like me who suffers with self-esteem, and Raz even, waking up, looking in the mirror, and then telling yourself you look sexy type deal, right? And how that mentally can create a positive outlook, because he's taking this same pathway through the grass in your brain. He's making a new path to walk on. You kind of have to make that new path where, even though your brain wants to think my emotions don't matter to other people, or I'm not going to matter, I'm invalid, you got to start taking the baby steps in the different grass, in the tall grass that you haven't touched yet. Take those baby steps and start approaching, hey, I do matter, my opinions do matter, my emotions do matter, they matter to me, and in turn, if they don't matter to someone else, then that person isn't worth my time. But being able to express that's one of the first baby steps, is identifying the problem. And then also identifying, if you're one of the people who are like, man, I don't want to hurt this person with my emotions, right? Being able to comprehend that pain is just a part of life. Pain provides growth. And I know for me, and for most human beings, pretty much every human being, they would rather hear the honest to God truth about how you feel than have you hide that or lie about it. Either of those hurt worse in the long run and cause more pain and distress within your relationship than it would have in the beginning, if you could just be honest about how you feel and how you approach a subject. Now, here, the other part of that, there's many different sides of this. The part Peyton approached was not hurting him because of her emotions, but upsetting him because how her state of mind can make her, or like lead her to speak to him in a certain way, right? So that is just a process of managing control over your emotions when you have them. And if you feel that you are in a heated moment where you're going to say something you shouldn't say, it's okay to take a break.
It is, yeah.
It's
Nonviolent
okay to
communication,
own
there's
that
a whole
break.
module on walking away.
So owning that break is important. Taking those breaks, whether it's 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 minutes, take your break, and then make sure you come back to it, because it's your feelings are still not invalid. In fact, I think one of the things I found out in a recovery thing that I was processing through is basically when you are about to talk about something that really upsets you or has really affected your relationship with someone else, when you find calm moments. So let's say you're out on a date with your significant other and you're having a really good time, and most people will have this mentality that they're like, wow, we're having such a good time right now, I don't want to ruin it with this. But those are actually the best times to bring things up like that are more serious, because you're both in a calm state of mind and it's easier to approach the subject and talk about it non-violently with each other. It's a really good time to be able to do it. It's a really healthy time to be able to do it, which a lot of people don't understand that perspective. The other thing with Ramsey talking about how it can be viewed as neediness.
Yep.
Overcoming neediness is a very important part of life. You cannot live your life depending on someone else. But there's a very specific line. Like, let's say I have plans with Michael to have a co-stream, and Michael backs out for a reason that I feel isn't even significant enough to back out. And then I get upset because he committed to something and now we're not streaming together, right? Me getting upset is okay, and me expressing those feelings is okay. But if I take that a step further and say, well, we're not going to be friends, or I'm not going to stream with you anymore, or something along those lines, that's where the neediness applies. That's the manipulation, and this is how I'm going to try to get what I want out of this, as opposed to just expressing your feelings in a healthy manner. So there's a distinct difference between being needy and communicating your emotions. And if someone can't handle you communicating your emotions, that just basically means that they haven't had enough practice handling being in situations where someone might have a specific emotion or something. And that's not your fault, and you don't have control over that. And if it gets to the point where it's toxic, you have to learn when and when not to cut toxic people out of your life. That's just a part of life.
I mean, that's a reflection on themselves and about their own experiences. And people who are worth it, you might take their hand and you might lead them through the tall grass with you and say, hey, I want to grow with you and I want you to be in a position where we can talk to each other in a good manner. But there's other situations, kind of what Casual's referencing, where it's just some people just don't, it's going to be tough. And sometimes they're just not worth having in your life. Anybody who invalidates you consistently or who tries to manipulate you by making you do certain things. I mean, the whole beginning section of the first module was about how we don't want to guilt or shame people into doing what we want them to do. And that neediness, that whole I'm not going to stream with you thing, from going back to your example, that's a way for the other party to manipulate the other person into co-streaming. What kind, you ask yourself, you follow the thread to the end and you ask yourself, what is the end game of this? The end game is that at the end of the day, he's kind of coercing me into streaming with him. The content's not going to be good because I'm not going to want to be there, right? And if the content is not good, then both of our streams suffer. And not only that, the person who is getting coerced is now growing resentment inside of them because of the fact that they're getting coerced. And you might not even realize that, but eventually you go, okay, I really don't like the fact that every time that we have this conversation or we speak or whatever, I'm getting reminded of this thing that I did, and he's trying to guilt me or trying to shame me or trying to blame me into doing something else for him, basically. And kind of going back to your beginning point about following it to the root of the problem, I think that's the observation module tried and true. That's why nonviolent communication works the way that it does, and it works so well, is the fact that it starts with an observation. And because it starts with an observation, you are starting at the root. You are saying, this is the observation that I have witnessed, and out of that observation comes a feeling, and then we follow the feeling down to the need, and then we follow that need to a positively tuned request. Not stop doing this, it's please continue to do this, or please do this in a different manner, or please do this instead of this. So I think nonviolent communication kind of paves the way for its own success and the way that it's formed, because it starts with the observation. So at the end of the day, you're starting with your trigger point. You're saying, when you did that specifically, and not when you were procrastinating or when you were being an asshole. Again, those are evaluations of the person's character and of the person's behavior. You want specific, identifiable, objective things that happened. And if you start at a specific, identifiable, objective thing, it's much easier to go throughout the process and say, hey, because of this, I feel this way, and that's because my need's not being met. And here's what you could do differently in order for the next time my need to be met. So
Right.
Wolfie says, I'm here and I'm sobbing because I just went through so much of this. It's okay, though. These are okay feelings for me to have right now. I appreciate you guys so much for talking about these things. Appreciate you, Wolfie.
It's
I
always
mean,
good to feel what you're feeling and to
it is. Yeah.
sit in it. What's not good is when you're feeling something and you don't want to be feeling it. For example, sadness or anger, and you can't get that under wraps. Those are the things that we want to avoid, and that's what we try to provide techniques and practices that we learn through our own therapists and everything that help get through those kinds of things. I think we haven't approached this yet today, but before we move forward, Michael and I are not professionals. We have not gone to school for this. We have not gone through any official training for this. There is no part of us that can help you overcome these things in a professional manner. And if you are struggling with something along the lines that we have been speaking of, like depression without cause or anything like that, we highly recommend that you reach out and find professional help. There are avenues you can take to actually get free professional help as well if you don't have insurance or you can't afford counseling. I have a friend who is a professional, and she was on the last episode that we had, which was a much deeper, more serious episode, but she has reached out to me and given me the okay to link her up with anyone that wants to reach out if they need resources or if they need someone to talk to that is a professional or anything like that. So if anyone does need that, don't hesitate to reach out to me or Michael, and I can approach getting her in touch with anyone and everyone that does need that help. This is what she lives for. It's basically her entire life. But acknowledge that we are not professionals. This is not professional counseling. You are not in professional counseling right now. You are in a podcast where two normal guys are talking about our own mental health and the things that have helped us approach being better mentally, and we're both just taking baby steps like the rest of us. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the tall grass that we've been talking about, basically the concept is your brain has neurological pathways that you take, and if you think of it like a field of tall grass, and let's say you walk a path every single day in the tall grass, well, eventually there's going to be a path where the grass lays down, and that's going to be the path that your mind wants to go down naturally. So if you're doing something every day, responding in anger, thinking of things that make you sad without your control and just doing it over and over, I think one big thing, it's basically like the concept of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. We want to shift that path and start walking in the tall grass again, creating a new, healthier path. And you do that with baby steps, even the entire way. It's not like there's going to be a point where you're taking leaps and bounds. You're actually, the entire time, you're just taking baby steps, one step at a time. And eventually that new path will be formed, and it'll be easy to take the steps that are healthier for your mental health, your brain, and for those around you, and for you to be able to have the mental space you need to help others, or to help yourself. So I linked a book in chat. This is a book that helped me a lot. I listened to it on Audible because I've definitely struggled with my own mental neediness, especially stemming from abandonment from my real dad and a lot of other shit that's happened in my life. But basically, I've been a very needy human being, and I mean needy in an unhealthy way, not needy in a healthy way. And this book has helped me identify that neediness in myself, learn how to be happy with myself, regardless of if someone else is in my life. So like basically, like a lot of people have this concept that they'll meet the love of their life, and then there's this sudden thought that, well, I couldn't live without them. That's neediness. That is the definition of, regardless of if you're married or anything in between. The thing is you can live without them, and you can find happiness without them. And it's important that you know that you can be happy on your own, because that's how you approach being independent and being responsible for yourself, for your own emotions, for your own life, and comprehending that no one else is going to provide your happiness. It's unhealthy to expect someone else to provide your happiness. And then it also approaches the other side, where if you're dealing with someone who is needy, how you can communicate to them or push them away from that neediness and help them identify their own neediness, because it is a big problem that a lot of people have. And then also it'll help you comprehend and understand when sharing something is needy or isn't needy. So like that's a common issue, is people that are like, man, I want to convey my emotions, but I'm afraid that this is going to come off as too needy. Well, there's a fine line between needy unhealthily and being needy in a healthy manner, or like needing something or wanting something to meet your needs to make you happy. So it helps you and differentiate those two segments. And then also, like, I think one big thing that helped me understand, because I've had needy people in my life, or for instance, people that will talk about how nobody cares about them and how the whole world doesn't care, and then consistently post different things about how basically their existence is subsequential and no one gives a shit about them. And it's almost like throwing a pity party, and what they want and need is attention. But the problem is when you give that attention, you're teaching them that that is the proper way to get the attention. So what you're doing is you're reinforcing and you're giving them the affirmation. So although it may be hard and you may feel like a piece of shit, instead of reaffirming or providing that attention, figure out a way to get them help if it really is something they need, and approach it from a different way. Because some people want attention to this, oh, well, I'm here for you, you're not alone, you're a beautiful person, blah, 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 whatever it may be, this temporary fulfillment that will stop them for the moment, and then whenever they need it again or want it again, they're going to do the same thing. But instead, maybe when you reach out to them, start approaching the harder subjects, like, hey, I want to help you get help. Like, get
right. Like, I notice every time you're in one of these moods, it's after you've hung out with your ex-boyfriend.
Right.
Or I notice that every time that you reach out to me, it's when you've had an argument with your mom. So is it because you've had an argument with your mom, or is it going on with your ex, or what are the deeper roots to the to what's going on? What causes these kind of bouts of neediness?
And that falls
Ramsey
right
says it.
into that nonviolent communication, because
Exactly.
learning how to convey your emotions and your needs also will help you guide others
To receive it correctly.
right,
Yeah.
through the tall grass to how they can convey it and everything.
Yeah.
You know, it's a two-way street. So
Yeah, and that goes directly into what Ramsey said. And she says, I think one of the most difficult things that I personally experience with communicating feelings, emotions, and needs is that the other person immediately goes on the defensive and just starts going in on all of my own shortcomings and what I'm doing wrong, which clearly is not constructive at all. Right. So a lot of the times, this happens very frequently, as somebody who is adept and good at nonviolent communication is going to be, what's the word? They're going to be they're going to be doing the heavy lifting from both sides, basically, because you're going to be expressing yourself in a nonviolent way. And in Ramsey's example, they're going to be, well, remember when you did this and you did that? And it's going to be your job to kind of hold the reins and be like, okay, I understand that you also have some unmet needs. Let's focus on my unmet needs because we've brought them up, and then let's move on to your unmet needs. And you're going to have to kind of referee the entire situation from both sides of the perspective. And that begs an important question of, is that relationship worth you doing double the work? In some relationships, it's 100% worth it. If it's the love of your life, if you've been, if you are, connected to them, and if it's your mom and you just absolutely love, and there's just some misunderstandings, totally 100%. The times where those questions are important is when you're with somebody who has a toxic way of communicating and a toxic way of expressing themselves. No matter, in certain instances, I like to think that there's nobody beyond help, but in certain instances, because of the context of the way people were raised, and then how people kind of come together in their adulthood, and how they kind of let their traumas from their childhood come out. Sometimes it's at the particular time in that situation, it's just no matter how you constructively, positively, non-violently communicate how you're feeling, they're always going to go and try to make you feel bad for it. They're always going to take the blame for it. They're always going to take it in a way where you're talking shit about them, or beyond that, they're going to try to basically lay it all on top of you and say, "Hey, this is all your fault," or "Hey, how about all these 10 million other times that you said this, that, and the other, and it made me feel negatively," you know? So certain situations you're going to have to kind of analyze and look at and say, is it worth doing the heavy lifting on both sides? Is the relationship worth kind of investing that much effort into? And some relationships are worth it, no doubt. Other relationships, you might come to different conclusions. So
Yeah, anyone can change. That's always going to be a thing. Change is a constant in life. I think one thing that helped, I'm reading JC's comment about
right.
an ex. Basically, every time you talk about it, they would approach it like it wasn't their fault or try to justify their actions and get defensive, obviously. So this is the beauty of this tall grass acknowledgement, is understanding how neurological pathways work. So if you do have a significant other and you approach something, understand that the next time you approach it, they're going to respond the same way. Most human beings don't have a comprehension of taking those baby steps yet. Most people aren't. Well, like when we went to school, we didn't have like a mental health course that was like, hey, this
No,
is how you can do this, this is how you can do
no,
that. Most people you talk to have never been to therapy in their lives. It's an unspoken of thing, and most people have mental health issues that are unsolved. And so a lot of these people are just walking that same path in the grass, and they're seeing nothing wrong with it because it's what they've always done, and they're not comprehending the problems that it may cause. So and a common issue with that is someone will be like, oh, you always do this, or this is how you always react, or I knew you'd react this way. So the thing is like, when you go into it, it's good to take prep time. One big thing that, because for me, dealing with triggers that I've had in the past, one thing that was a big deal was in the calmer moments, whether I'm with myself or with someone else, to start planning against those triggers, to bring the battle to the triggers or to the obsessive thinking, as opposed to letting it fall on me and then trying to solve the problem. So whenever you approach a person with your emotions or whatever it may be, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result is insanity. It's on both ends. So when you approach someone and they consistently just try to justify themselves and everything like that, then that's when you start to think, okay, well, how can I approach this to where they don't feel like they're being attacked, or they don't feel
exactly.
like it's their fault? How can I
And that's
communicate?
where nonviolent communication comes in,
Right.
because
How can I
it really
communicate it?
diffuses that situation. It's the way you communicate it and what you say. And like I said, you take the dive into nonviolent communication, and a lot of the times you're going to have to be doing the heavy lifting on both sides, because even if you marshmallow what your feeling is and your need, and you say, I don't want to make you feel this way, and I don't want to make you feel this way, and we never make anyone feel, even the language that we use, we never make anyone feel anyway. But I don't want to start an argument or anything, and you try to kind of tiptoe your way around the conversation. Even in that manner, they may still take offense to it, and they may still come at you with this whole "you too" fallacy thing. Well, how about when you do this, and how about when you do this? And it takes a certain amount of practice, a certain degree of practice, to pump the brakes in that situation, slow down, and say, okay, I understand you also have some unmet needs, and I'm very glad that we're talking about them. Can we focus on the ones on my unmet needs first? And then after we go through that conversation, can we come to your unmet needs and we can talk about that? Right. Um, some people, you're right. I mean, they might feel bad because they might even if you nonviolently communicate, they might still, because of their past, trauma and their triggers and their context through which they were raised and kind of how they view life and things like that, they might still kind of trip in their brain and be like, yo, like this guy's trying to blame me for something. And back in my childhood, my dad would always blame me for something, and I fucking hated my dad, so like, and therefore that's it. Then they're seeing red and you've lost them, right? So a lot of the times it's kind of like an ignorance is bliss type of situation where, it'd be nice to just not know how to communicate because a lot of it is a lot of work, but at the same time, it's worth it to implement that way of communicating, especially in a relationship that means a lot to you. And implementing that way of communicating and really trying and really diving in and understanding how the emotion bubbles up from a need and how to express yourself effectively will really, I think it'll teach you whether the relationship is worth it. Because at the end of the day, when you become really adept at nonviolent communication, it's not easy, but it's clearer to see that the other person, maybe you and them just don't jive. And it doesn't have to be a significant other. It could be your mom, it could be your grandmother, it could be a friend, it could be a coworker, it could be a boss, it could be anybody, right? What nonviolent communication kind of teaches you is that template, is that rubric of saying, okay, well, I did this and I did this and I did this, and I'm juggling both sides of the conversation, and I'm expressing myself empathetically and affectionately, and I'm being compassionate, and I'm not trying to judge, and I'm not trying to blame. And then you go back to your friend who's, also hopefully well versed in nonviolent communication, and you bounce off the conversation between you and that friend, and the friend says, yeah, man, I mean, I feel like you've approached it in a very positive manner, and the way that you had the communication was very nonviolent, so I'm not exactly sure why the other person reacted in that manner, right? So at that point, you have bigger questions that kind of bubble up from the situation. Is the person capable of nonviolent communication? I think everyone is capable. I just think people need to be in the right state of mind to be capable. And for some people, that state of mind is not a temporary state of mind. Some people just are in that state of mind forever, and it's really difficult to pull them out of that and shift their perspective and just be like, yo, this is the perspective through which I want to communicate. And Wolfie giving us a story about a friend who's attention seeking. Yeah, I mean, if you truly, so I feel like a horrible friend and I'm not there for him, but he also is very much like a broken record that doesn't take advice, so I'm not even sure how to help him. I mean, one thing is professional help, and that's not you kind of, that's not you selling him off to a therapist or something, trying just to like get your hands clean and just be like, fine, he's finally not bothering me or whatever. But sometimes that is kind of the best route to get a person to kind of start tugging on those strings of the knot that's knotted inside of them and start kind of unwinding it a little bit. Other times, kind of what me and Casual alluded to earlier, is there's usually a trigger for those types of needy moments. So if you are very involved with that individual, I would say pay attention to what is the precursor to that trigger. What happens in their life before they start becoming needy. If you're not that close, it might be really hard to understand, right? You might have to reach out to their mom or their dad or their coworker or whoever, right, to kind of gather an understanding of whether of what's going on in their life to kind of make them in that fashion. Because outside of a chemical imbalance in their brain that kind of causes that neediness and causes that depression, anxiety, whatever it may be that gets manifested as neediness, it usually is some kind of trigger that occurs in their life, whether it's whatever, they saw their mom or they broke up with their ex yet again, or, in a much darker sense, maybe they got physically, emotionally abused by their partner at home. You don't know what's happening, right? But a lot of the times it's kind of really pushing the envelope in the sense of, hey, what is going on to lead you into this mindset? Because you don't want to prop up the mindset of the neediness, right? You don't want to prop up, oh, you're not worthless and you're amazing and you're such a great friend, because that's not really, that's kind of what Casual alluded to, which is you're telling them that it's okay to act that way because that's the way that you're going to respond to them. But in reality, it's okay, I understand that you're feeling in this manner. What's been going on in your life to kind of make you feel this manner? Because I feel like every Tuesday or every other week you're like this, or every month you're like this. What is the trigger point? Can you identify what the trigger point is, right? That's if, of course, you're close enough to that individual where you feel like it's applicable for you to help and it's appropriate for you to help.
So there's multiple other ways to approach it as well. Basically, when you're dealing with someone that's needy like that, in my step-by-step process, this is how I like to approach things. Step one, be honest. That's one of the best things you can do, is be honest. Say, hey, I think you're being too needy. I have a life. I have things going on, and I can't just dedicate all of my attention to you on a whim whenever you need it. And this is regardless of if this is your significant other, a friend, a family member. It doesn't matter, because no human being is going to be able to just drop everything and be there for you every single time you need it. Every single little thing. It's just not a thing. Two, don't reinforce in the moments that they're begging for it. Instead, do the opposite. So like you're saying, they threaten to delete their social media or whatever. Lead by example. So, oh, I'm going to delete my Facebook because no one wants to talk to me. Okay, do it. It doesn't affect you. You're independent. You live your life and don't need someone else to be happy. So show them that. And that's going to show them a whole lot. Like, they're not going to keep threatening that, because it's not getting them what they want. It's not getting them, it's not fulfilling that neediness. And instead they might come back and apologize or something. Now, when that point comes, this is where you can differentiate whether someone is worth keeping around or not, or if you need to cut them out. And this is important for you, because you want to be there. You want to be a good friend. You don't want to feel like a shitty person or feel guilty as much as they want to guilt trip you. You just set boundaries. So, oh, I'm threatening to delete my social media anytime I can't get the attention I want. But then they come and the conversation comes up and you can go, okay, so don't do that. Do not threaten me with deleting your social media. Don't threaten me to disappear. Especially don't threaten suicide. Set those boundaries.
Yeah.
And if they cross those boundaries without any regard for how you feel and the fact that you set those boundaries, maybe give them one more chance. But then that's the point where you can't control them. All you can do is control your actions. And if you want that toxicity out of your life, take it out. That's it.
Right. Boundaries are important, and they're very healthy. And we've been taught that boundaries aren't. Implicitly, we've been taught. No one's ever explicitly come up to us and said boundaries aren't good. But we've implicitly been kind of coerced into believing that that's what it is, because we don't want to tell other people, hey, that's not okay, because we intrinsically feel, oh, I just gross, because like I'm telling them no and they're feeling bad because of it. And in reality, we want to flip that on its head. And we want to say the boundary is your connection to your own soul and what you need out of a relationship. And respect from person to person, they should understand that, hey, that boundary is set, and that's a specific reason for that boundary being set, and I respect this individual enough to say, hey, I'm so sorry I infringed your boundary. Next time I'll know, and next time it won't happen, right? So I think it's important to kind of unlearn the great unlearning, so it's called, to unlearn the fact that these boundary setting behaviors are healthy. We want boundaries in a relationship. It's important to have them in any relationship. So
yeah, I've had issues in the past with people that they came in to my streams and were making fun of my physical appearance and like really just dogging on me a lot. And it was like a roast session, but it got to a point where it started actually mentally affecting me. And I'd already been having previous issues with this person for multiple other things, and I had already been able to comprehend how they react to conflict, or to being approached about conflict. And so for me, it was a much more comfortable situation if I could get a couple mutual friends involved, to just be third-party listeners when I approach the conflict, because then there could be no rumors or anything that I had fears of rising out of it happening. And so whenever I finally approached them with two other people that were very unbiased and of sound mind, they revealed exactly what I thought they would. They acted exactly how I thought they would, because I had analyzed their behaviors in the past. And when I laid out the boundaries, All they cared about was that I didn't approach them alone, or that I didn't care enough to approach them alone, as opposed to it
The
was
actual point of the problem.
it was an
Yeah.
issue that, and the thing was these two people that were listening in were both very unbiased, good people that both of us were close friends with. So in the end, as important as this person was in my life, I had to cut them out, and because of their lack of comprehending and respecting my boundaries. And to
Yeah.
this day, I've seen them in other people's streams doing the exact same shit.
Yep.
And
Bagging on their appearance and stuff. Yeah.
yeah, and I'm not gonna name any names because I'm not one to bring up any drama or anything. But the thing is like, regardless of how important someone is or how much they financially support you or whatever it may be, if the person is toxic for your mental health, no amount of money, no amount of quality time or whatever it may be that's keeping you around is going to be worth that tax on your mental health. It's not.
Right.
It's just not worth it. The people
Yeah.
that are good for you and the people that are worth keeping around are the ones that make you feel happy in the moments that
Yeah.
you're with them. And then
People
when
that
you're
are
not
meant to
around,
be.
it's
Exactly.
not like, if you notice a lot of people that are like best friends, right? True best friends. You can be hanging out and then move to separate states, right? But then as soon as you hang out again months or years later, it's almost like you're just catching up from yesterday. Like
Yep.
there is no resounding issues or conflict or anything in regards to anything. And so like a lot of people have this tangled mentality with best friendships that is like, oh, you're my best friend, so you come over everyone, you're more important than anyone. And that's just not a healthy mentality to have, because as a human being, and this is something that I had just with my wife and child, was for the longest time my wife would put my child over me as precedence, and which is not healthy at all for a relationship. Whereas there should be no prioritizing. It should just be, I love you both equally, and here it is. Now granted, if they're hanging off the edge of a cliff and you have to choose to save one, obviously you should save your child, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Specific circumstances. If one has cancer, whatever, obviously. But yeah.
Right. But in the precedent of genuine who takes priority in certain situations, like whatever it may be, it should be judgment calls every time, and it shouldn't just be, oh well, this is my child, so they're automatically more important, or they take precedence over someone
Exactly.
else. And that
Yeah.
goes for anyone in your life. Like if you're taking balance, I read this what was it, like a meme the other day, and it was like, if he's still taking you to Red Lobster in your 30s, and whatever it may be, like a cheaper restaurant in your 30s, and he's not the one. And then like under it said basically how it doesn't fucking matter if he's taking you to McDonald's or whatever the fuck. What's important is if the quality time they're giving you is important and is
Right.
helping you mentally. So like if you're prioritizing materialistic things or money or whatever it may be over mental health and love and the intangible things, you're not doing anything for yourself. And it's the same thing with if someone's being toxic in your life and that's how they're treating it, and they're treating it like, oh well, you're not, like I had someone the other day that was like, you don't ever ask me to play games with you anymore or stream with you and blah blah blah. And I kind of had to like drop the ball on them and be like, yo, like I've been going through this and this and this and this. I have these people in my life right now that I'm really dedicating my attention to, and it has nothing to do with me not caring about you. It has everything to do with me just not, like I'm human and I don't think about you 24/7. And if you want to play games with me, communicate that need.
Yeah, it's a two-way street.
We'll figure it out. But if you're getting mad at someone and expecting them to read your mind, you're not doing either of you any good. And so even with me and Michael, we planned this podcast for Sunday and then ended up canceling because both of us are doofuses, and we moved it to today, and we're like, yeah, today at 3. And then I'm streaming Dead by Daylight with Jinx, and Michael comes into my chat at like 3:18, and I'm like, oh yeah, like, damn, we're supposed to be doing this right now. And so, and what happened was I ended up messaging him, and he's like, cool, I'm eating. I got off after that game, and here we are. That's not either of us being needy. That's just like healthy. We're here, we're both human, we both comprehend we're human, and then boom, like that's what creates and forms a good friendship and a good relationship with anyone in your life is
I would be mistaken to say that I didn't feel a little bit of guilt to tell you that I couldn't do it last week. But it's about taking that step and just being like, listen, like he would rather hear me tell him how I'm feeling specifically and how I wasn't necessarily in a bad mental place or anything. I just had a lot going on and I overcommitted. So I was like, I think he would much rather hear me tell him the truth, the honest truth, and say, hey, let's pick it up at a time where we're both more involved and more connected to the subject matter, rather than just pushing forward and just being like, whatever, I'm overcommitted, screw it, let's just have a shitty podcast, And then
I think
that
we
kind
were
of comes
both in
out
the
through the
same
content.
space. Because like last week we were supposed to do this episode, and you hit me up and you're like, "Hey, this and this and this and this," and I was like, "Dude, thank God he's canceling."
Yeah, exactly.
The same shit was going on my side. I was just like extremely overwhelmed that day,
Exactly.
and, like, really tired, and I wasn't ready to talk about all the things that like approaching a conversation like this, because this takes a lot of mental energy. Whether people understand that or not, people that are viewing this podcast, this takes a lot of mental space and a lot of mental energy, even when we're talking about the smaller, like simpler things. It's us coming out of our shells, especially. I know I'm very introverted, so for me, like, I really have to like dedicate myself and my time and my attention, and then reopen up the parts of me that I'm not used to sharing with people and stuff like that. And for me, it's actually a very healthy thing, but sometimes it's better that I don't do it. And being the one that kind of like primarily leads the podcast, because like every episode I'm in it, and then it's whoever is doing it with me, as opposed to the opposite. Which, I'm not gonna lie, I was like super stressed out when I did the one with Chris, because it was such a heavy subject and topic, and it went really well, but I just was so nervous about saying or asking the wrong things. But in the end, I think there's this comprehension that you're either going to try and succeed or fail, or you're never going to try. And what kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to grow out of the success or failure, or do you want to never know what could have been because you never came out and put forward whatever foot needed to be put forward to achieve what you thought you wanted to achieve?
Exactly. No, I think that's important, because I mean, a lot of it is the things that I go through in therapy as well with my therapist. Specifically, I've had difficulty setting boundaries, especially with people that are really close to me, like my mom and old friends from childhood, which I can bring up an anecdote at some point about setting boundaries and stuff. And I go through, these learnings and musings with my therapist, and I kind of come to her and I say, hey, we talked about this last week and I tried to bring it up and I flubbed the ball and I got mad and I stormed out of the room and I didn't really, and then somebody said something and I got even more mad or whatever. And she makes it a point to say, Michael, like, all of this stuff is really hard. Like, you're not going to get it perfect 100% correct the first time. And even if you get it right 100% perfect correct one time, that doesn't mean the next time you're going to bring it up you're going to say the right stuff, because we're talking about it in this space where it's like really easy to facilitate that kind of conversation, right? I'm empathetic, I'm compassionate, I understand where you're coming from. Whereas when you take it out into the wild and you try to implement it in the wild with other people, especially with people that there's context with, right? Like your mom or your dad or your significant other or whoever it is, it's really hard. It's very difficult. So a lot of the times it's going to be a lot of failure, a lot of falling on your face, getting back up, realizing what you did wrong, augmenting your behavior, and then trying again. So, I mean, more recently, there was a guy who I hung out with that I've had to cut out of my life more recently. Me and him were childhood friends. We went to high school together. We got into trouble more often than not, which kind of coincidentally that builds a lot of friendships a lot of the times when you guys both get in trouble together, and then you kind of become friends out of that, when your moms have to like talk to the cops or something together and get your asses out of a bind or something. So me and him were like relatively close, and he kind of he was very sheltered as a kid. So then when he went off to college, he just kind of sprung out like a top, right? He just went crazy. He used his loans for pot and for alcohol and all this other stuff. So, the next time I saw him during college, he was a little bit, for lack of a better term, he was a little bit unhinged. He was just kind of always doing something and always had to be doing something. Where was the next party? What are we doing next? When are we doing drugs? When are we getting drunk? Like it was always something new, something next with him. And I hung out with him for I think the last time was in 2017. Or no, it was 20, God, it was a long time ago, 2013 or 2014. He came over during one of my spring breaks, and I just felt like he wasn't the same person. I mean, he came over at 9 a.m. with a Four Loco. Like, I mean, what else do I need to tell y'all? Like, he was just like not in the right mindset all the time. He was just always drunk or always high. And more recently, back in 2018, 2019, I've had the same phone number since God knows when. So he reached out to me because he memorized my phone number from back when we were in high school. And he kept reaching out to me. And eventually he was like, yo, like we should hang out, we should hang out. And I felt that kind of tug, right? I felt internally, I was like, this guy wants to hang out. And, we were close. And maybe he still has some kind of, some of those aspects of inside of himself that kind of made me become friends with him in the first place. Um, and eventually he just started calling me at weird hours, like 1 p.m. during my 9 to 5 between Monday and Friday, like just weird stuff. He eventually got my mom's phone number somehow because I gave it to him like an idiot. And he was calling my mom, so she had to block him. So long story short, he infringed a lot of my boundaries. And more recently, he started contacting me again. And just last night, I just straight up blocked him because like I just don't have time for it. I don't have the mental capacity. I don't have the emotional capacity. He clearly is not in the right mind space because if he was, I would expect for him to put in some work, right? I would expect for him to come to me and say, yo, remember that time 6 or 7 years ago when we hung out together? Bro, I am so embarrassed that that was the way that I acted. I was just so addicted to this and I had these problems and I had problems at home or whatever, right? And that never happened, right? He would just always kind of recede into the shadows and then come out when he was convenient for him. And that was one of the probably only times where I've had to cut somebody out specifically completely. And in terms of objective trauma, I don't think it was that big of a deal. But at the same time, I still felt kind of that tug and that pull towards him. So it was a lesson for me to learn that, hey, sometimes y'all just aren't going to be friends again, which is okay. Because I tried, right? We hung out a few times. We drank a few beers, we went out and we smoked a little bit, and we just didn't jive. We just didn't vibe at all. So, in that specific manner, especially when he started like calling my mom and shit and infringing upon her privacy and calling me during work days and stuff like that, I mean, that was time to kind of cut him out. So at some point, kind of, alluding to the conversations we've kind of had throughout the podcast, that might be that might be the solution. Not necessarily the solution, but that might just be the next step. Where if somebody's continuously infringing upon your boundaries and you've made it clear that, hey, don't call me during a work day, and they just keep doing it, they might not just be worth having around. So something to think about.
Yeah. And if you're like me, you're the type of person who will go above and beyond to make sure that you've tried absolutely everything to keep the relationship intact before
Yeah.
finally cutting the ties. And that's okay to do, but just have a process, have a step-by-step process. I think one other thing that can help in these situations that, when I talk about preparing for things, especially if the other person's willing to help you prepare. So like, let's say you have a person and you're trying to be able to communicate your feelings or your needs to them, and they respond with this very defensive, I didn't cause this mentality or whatever it may be, and they try to start justifying their actions. Then whenever you're not having one of those arguments, approach them and be like, hey, how can we approach this issue that we've been having? I feel like whenever, or I guess not I feel like, but whenever, you say, whenever I approach my emotions or my needs, you tend to get defensive and try to justify your actions. How can I communicate it to you in a way that will make you feel like you're not being attacked? And what will make you feel better in those situations? Because some people can be they feel like they're being put in a corner or something, right? And let's say their love language is physical touch. So you can come up to them and maybe put your hand on their shoulder or something to let them know you're physically there and that you physically care, and then start approaching it. Stuff like that actually does help
Right.
psychologically when you're approaching things like that, and being able to guide someone through new pathways and taking those baby steps. So I think
Right.
coming up with a plan is definitely a big part of that, and being able to use all of the tools that you guys have. So like there's so many tools that I've developed, and techniques within helping myself, and I love to be able to share those and provide those for other people, but whether they use them or not is on them. And the only thing
Yeah,
you
that's
can
yeah.
do and the only
You can
thing you
only
can
give tools.
control is what you do in the moment. You can't control the future. You can't control the past. The only thing you can control is your actions in the moment, in the current moment. And that's the hardest part about all of this, is because there's a lot of times we want to look back and be like, damn, well, I got really aggressive with my speech, or I should have done this differently, or I should have done that differently. It's good to acknowledge those things, but then moving forward, just remember that in the moment, your reactions and everything have so much to do with what will happen and what the outcome will be. And if you care so much about the outcome, you're going to invest what you have into those moments, because every single moment counts. Wolfie says she has a question.
Yeah.
What up, Wolfie?
What if their love language is physical touch, but you guys are like over an hour away? What's a good way to approach then? Because I feel like I shouldn't just put everything on the back burner till we can travel to see one another.
Everyone has multiple love languages.
Yeah. Yeah, it
So,
doesn't need to be. Yeah.
and there are ways to provide a sense of physical touch from a distance to be able to still show that love. Um, for instance, because my main love language is physical touch. So, like, that can also mean, let's say you send me a stuffed animal or a fidget toy or something that appeals to my sensory with my physical touch, a blanket. That's going to show me that version of love, right? Now that may not be, oh, here's a blanket. By the way, we need to talk about this, right? Because from far away, it's a lot harder to have those conversations.
Right.
Being in a distance relationship right now, I can tell you I've already been in situations where it's been harder to express emotions. And I think one really important thing is to not force emotions or force someone to talk about them if they don't feel like they can talk about them in the moment. Just accept that and move forward. And when they're ready, and they may not be ready until you are in person, right? And that may just be something you have to approach from that angle. But find out what their other love language is as well, because it could be quality time, it could be acts of service. Another way you can approach physical touch is buy them a spa day or something like that. That's going to make them feel good physically. Buy them something that will motivate them to exercise, because that's a big part of your physical existence as well as exercising. If you find out there are other, because usually people have two. Everyone likes all 5 languages, but usually there's 2 main ones, and those change throughout the years, even throughout the months. So if they like gifts, maybe get them a gift within that moment, and then when you approach it, maybe have that gift be personal on a level of what you're about to approach or what you're about to talk about. So like you're going to talk about how they justify and defend all the time, and you feel like you can't talk about whatever emotions you may be having because it's automatic, like I'm gonna jump to justifying what I did or how I'm acting. Maybe get them something to remind them that that's a thing, like if there's this is just off the top of my head, like maybe like a bracelet or something with a shield on it, in the retrospect of you constantly trying to defend yourself, as a physical or mental reminder that when they're doing that, they can look at it and be like, oh yeah, I'm doing that right now. You know what I mean? But it's also you showing them that out of love, not attacking them. So there's different ways you can approach these things, and you can get really creative with it. And the thing is we don't think about these things naturally. This isn't just, oh, I'm just going to get this because of this. It's stuff that you actually have to put thought into. And that's what makes it work, because thought is love's currency. So like when you're putting your thought into someone else and your time and your energy, That's what makes them feel loved and not attacked, and what makes them feel like they can let their guard down and trust you, is because you're taking your time to put that thought into them. And a lot of the time that's just what the other person needs in order to be able to start approaching what you need.
All good points.
Yeah, FaceTime does help.
Yeah, definitely.
I spend a very large amount of time in Discord FaceTime
Yeah.
with Lauren
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah,
watching
my
shows with
my
her or
my
whatever.
yeah, dude, my battery's always at 10%. Because I'm FaceTiming all the time.
Yeah. But that, I think that makes, because then like if your love language is quality time and there's this physical, then that's like you can provide quality time within in FaceTime. His
Right.
predominant is actually quality time and then physical touch. So then have that quality time with them. But when you're don't go out of your way to have quality time with them specifically to approach an issue you're having. Have a good time doing what you both enjoy. Like if you're Discord chatting and watching one of your favorite shows, and then when things feel calm and good and like you're enjoying it, at the end of the episode or whatever it may be, stop it. You could be listening to music together at the end of the song. Stop the music for a moment and say, hey, so I've been feeling sad, frustrated, confused, fear, whatever it may be, and this is something that I think that we could do to meet my needs, and especially if you have someone that's defensive towards how they act or how they approach things. Instead of saying you can say we, because then you're approaching it as a team and you're not blaming them for anything, you're not putting any fault on them. You're just saying, hey, I'm feeling like this, and in order to feel better, I feel like this could help us. Because at the end of the day, if they really care about you, they're going to want you to feel good. They're not going to want you to feel fear. They're not going to want you to feel guilt or sadness or anger or whatever it may be.
Yeah, so they're going to want your needs to be met if they care. So,
and if their other one is words of affirmation and physical touch, then, I mean, words of affirmation is, a lot of people think, oh, that's easy. But the reality is it's actually not that simple, because you can use words of affirmation and then you can find yourself in this loop of saying the same words every time. So like I could be like, oh man, I just like really think you're pretty, or I think you're funny, or I think that you're really caring, right? But then if I've said that 1,000 different times, and those words of affirmation are no longer
lose their luster.
Yeah, they're not as deep. It's like you have to be creative and be like, oh, this and this and this and this, or come up with new ways to approach telling them that you care about them with your words, or that they're important, or that they're valid, which I'm really naturally good at because I have a lot of experience within the creativity field of writing, being a musician that writes music and poetry and stuff. But some people don't have that. And I'm not going to lie to you. This is literally a recommendation out of the 5 Love Languages book. If you don't know like how to create things to say, think about your favorite romance movies and then say what they say in those movies to each other. And it may seem like, oh, wow, I'm just kind of copying, or it's not coming. But the thing is it's not about if you came up with it. It's about how it makes them feel when you say it. That's and you're taking the time to figure out a thing that you could say that makes you think of them, right?
Yeah, you're putting an effort.
I don't personally do that, but that's what they recommend for people that don't have that creative flow or don't have that ability to whip up a poem or whatever it may be, is to take things from, even if it's from like a song, like you're listening to a love song and you're like, man, I really like this song and this makes me think of them. Tell them, and then when you like send them the song and say, hey, this makes me think of you, but then pick out a line in the song that's specific to, hey, this is the part that really makes me think of you, and I guarantee you it makes them feel happy to hear that, and these things can help you approach a better feeling and then give you more of an ability to express your needs in the long run.
Right. Mm-mm-mm.
I think that's a common, like, pretty much every podcast episode we've come into has come down to the love languages at one point or another.
Yeah, I think it is. Yeah, I think it's a good jumping off point in terms of like NVC and feelings. I'm done with my with all my notes. So that was the feelings module.
I think another thing you can do, Wolfie, and this is something we did 2 episodes ago. I was in, we were doing a Coffee Talks episode with Raz, and just before that, I was in Discord with Pack and Jinx, and I introduced them to Enneagrams, and
Mm.
a lot of the people that were watching ended up doing their Enneagram. And basically, if you don't know what an Enneagram is, it's a personality test. There's 9 types of personalities, and each person can basically be a certain type, and it'll help you to understand like their needs, their fears, their wants, etc., etc. And it's scary how accurate the Enneagrams can be.
Yeah,
But
Megan literally mentioned them in chat.
oh, that's funny. There's
Yeah.
actually a band that I listened to called Sleeping at Last that did an album on Enneagram types. Enneagram.
I'm quietly listening. I don't know if you're all familiar with Enneagram, but I'm in 2 years and I put literally everyone's wants and needs before my own. Invest in people's lives and just try to give more than I take. Physical touch and quality time. My love languages I best receive, and giving gifts and words of encouragement is what I give off. There came a time that I couldn't bear everyone's burdens and I had to confront my own. And that's just been really difficult. I've dealt with some form of abandonment my entire life, including a friendship that's ended out of nowhere with no reasoning. From that moment on, I'm terrified of friends leaving, and I'm going, and I talk about it a lot, and I don't want that. I know that's where trust and relationships come in. Social media has become so toxic, it's made me feel guilty of not being there enough for others. And I've debated leaving, and I've told a couple of my friends I know I'm not in a healthy state and want to get there. It's just a weird cycle. I know life comes in seasons. I want to give more, but it's difficult when you're like pouring from an empty cup. No, that's 100%. You got to get yourself right. Pouring from an empty cup is something I used to do in my relationships very frequently. I give, 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 and then you just don't have anything else. You don't have anything left. Right. So, and appreciate the vulnerability too, Megan.
Well,
Much love to you.
you have to find methods and techniques that work for you as far as draining out your mental space so that you have more.
Yep.
So for me, like, especially after podcast episodes when they get really heavy, my mental space is just full, and so you have to know when to say no, even if someone reaches out to you. And for me, what helps me, because I'll put myself on the fucking chopping block to help someone else, and sometimes it does more harm than good to me and even to our relationship because I don't have the mental space. And so what's helped me is to acknowledge my support system, and then whenever I have like no mental space available, being honest and being like, hey, I don't have the mental space for this right now. And then if I do have other people that are in my support circle that are very open, because I do have a lot of people in my community that are always open to talk to people, even if they don't know them, I can be like, hey, I don't have a lot of mental space, but my friend so and so is actually completely available to listen. They're a very good listener, and if you're comfortable, especially since it's a non-biased person that you've never met, you can bring these things to them. Or if you're willing to wait and let me kind of decompress, I'll come to you when I'm ready and we can discuss these things. Now, it's important to give yourself the time you need, and then to find the ways that you can approach finding your mental space. So for me, playing music, playing video games, spending time with people that can make me laugh, stuff like that really helps me create
You went
more
muted.
mental space.
Rip.
Oops.
Oops.
Spending time with people that can make me laugh, playing video games, playing music, writing poetry, stuff like that. Sometimes just being alone also helps. Going out in nature helps. Going on walks, whatever it may be. But that's how I drain out my mental space so that I have more space to be able to approach things. And being a 2, it's like you find purpose and deeper meaning in kind of sacrificing yourself to help others. I know a lot more about the two because I'm dating a two, and it's a very it's weird for me because I'm a four, so like I tend to take all of my problems and then put them inside myself and retreat and keep them to myself and handle them alone. But it doesn't help her because she wants to be a part of those issues. She wants to, and by that I mean she wants to be able to take some of that into her mental space and hold some of it and kind of carry the weight, but also to be able to help in any way that she can, even if it means sacrificing herself with the issues that I have. And if I don't share those things with her, there's this lack of importance or this lack of purpose. So I've had to start the process of really being okay with being open about what I'm feeling with her, because it provides a sense of fulfillment in her personality and who she is and purpose.
Right.
That's what makes her feel loved, is that
Yeah.
I'm willing to come with her with those things. But then sometimes she also has to understand that I'm not going to come with it, and I am going to retreat inside myself. And I kind of have to be picky, choosy about what I'm going to do and not do. And then also she has to learn to share, because a lot of you twos are so busy sacrificing yourself to help others that you don't reach out for help for yourself when you need it. It's one of your like biggest weaknesses, is you won't reach out for help. And so for situations like that, especially with what you're saying, you're doing the right thing. You're reaching out to your friends and you're saying, hey, this is going on. And like I think what's important is you're identifying, you say life comes in season, everything is temporary. The sadness is temporary. Whatever it is that's going is temporary. The only thing you can do now is take those baby steps towards feeling better about the moments and things that you can do to feel better. Like if you like a specific music, for me, I like Mac Miller a lot. If I turn on Mac Miller and sing to it, it takes my brain away from everything else, because your brain can only think about one thing at a time. So find the distractions. And if you don't know distractions, let me get the link.
Yeah, for me, it's out of the house, out of the head. So that's what I've used when I need distractions.
You're
so.
extroverted?
Yeah, I mean, I have to get, if I'm in a mood and I'm kind of sad and going over whatever it may be, a breakup, a sad moment, a friendship, whatever it may be, I need to get out of the house. I can't stay in the house. If I stay in the house, then I stay in my head, and if I'm out of the house, then I am out of my head. That's what's helped me personally. So that's kind of a summarizing of what you mentioned, which is hike, go out, do this, do that, sing to songs, write music,
spending time with people.
Exactly. Yep.
And so essentially, that I just posted a link to the episode that we did on distractions. That's 2.5 hours of us specifically talking about distractions. So if you don't know what your distractions are, me and Raz are two very different kinds of people, and we provided a lot of our own, and then Chad also provided a lot that day of what helps them. I think also being in those moments and like understanding the difference between introvert and extrovert, understanding that you can be both in what retrospects you are. But basically an introvert gains their energy when they're alone. An extrovert gains their energy when they're around people. And so like Pac is a really big extrovert, so he doesn't feel good unless someone like when he wants to be social or whatever, or he's around all of his friends. That's where he gains a lot of his energy. But if they're not providing energy in the atmosphere, it's not helping him. So it's like he needs people that are actually going to be actively interacting with him,
right,
for him to really absorb and gain energy. And gaining that energy is also releasing your mental space and draining out your mental space. So some people, they need that, whereas for me, I need to be alone a lot of the time to process my feelings, and I need to and being alone could also mean being with someone but doing nothing, or like watching just a show or something, not actually having that huge mesh of having to interact with each other, or having to answer questions, or have and hold conversation. There's times where like the other day, me and my wife were out at a restaurant, and she was trying to like monologue and ask me, hey, what made you happy this week, or what made you laugh today, or whatever it was. And I just was not trying to have a conversation. And she got kind of upset or frustrated or offended because I didn't want to talk. But it wasn't because I didn't want to have the conversation or whatever with her. It was specifically because in that moment I was really tired. I was really overflowing with a lot of my own emotions and stuff. And in the moment I wasn't able to express that because I kind of like got flooded, and flooding is an experience that many people have with anxiety or whatever it is. It's basically when, and I think one thing that can really relate to it is if you ever speak to like a heroin addict. This is a reason heroin addicts can't get away from the drug a lot of the times, is because heroin is experiencing flooding. Like that's what the drug does to you. It fills you with whatever emotion it is and completely like overfills you. And so essentially it's out of your control. And I experienced flooding a lot. So, and it starts with thoughts most of the time. Most of the time you have thoughts and it leads to this flooding. So I'll be overthinking about something, and then I'll feel sad or overwhelmed or tired or whatever it may be. But it'll be so much of that feeling that I can't get away from it. So it's harder for me to communicate in the moment. So instead of communicating, I'll just simply choose not to. I'll just simply choose
Right.
to stay quiet. And it may make someone feel like I'm upset with them or whatever. But for me, in those moments, it's easier for me to just not say anything. And it's easier for me to kind of take that easy way out, to just be like, hey, like, I'm not trying to talk right now. That's just it. I don't want to give an explanation. I don't want to, because like the thing is when I'm not trying to talk, it doesn't mean that I'm not trying to talk about what you're wanting to talk about. It means that I'm not trying to talk about anything. So
Yeah.
it's like, I don't want to have to explain why I'm not trying to talk, because I'm just genuinely like regaining my energy. I want to just have this dinner and eat this food and be here. And I can be here in your presence, but for me, that's a big process of me being an introvert and regaining my energy. So like a lot of the times there's been situations where I'll go to a party and everyone's having a blast and I'm kind of just sitting on the couch chilling. And people might think, oh, he's not having fun, or he's bummed out, or whatever it
That
is.
happens
But
to me. Yeah.
truth be told, I'm not bummed out at all. I'm a people watcher a lot of the time, so I'll just sit and like watch people party, and I'll be perfectly fine. I'm just, and that's me recollecting my energy or gaining my energy or trying to find comfort in the space that I'm in, because I'm an introvert, and at times you can crack me open, and I'm a whole different person. And I'll be the center of attention, and I'll be funny and everything in between. But most of the time, I'm going to shell up and I'm going to sit on the couch and I'm just going to chill. And I think that's what's weird about me being a streamer as well, is because when I'm a streamer, I kind of have to force myself to crack open and
Same. Yeah.
I like be funny and provide
Entertainment.
right. And then sometimes I just can't because I'm just introverted. So you might be watching me and I'm playing Fortnite and I get into this like focused state where I'm just really trying to like win at the game that I'm playing, as opposed to provide a space of conversation. And so like I find when I'm doing things, it's good to take breaks and then also to force myself open sometimes. But collecting that energy as an introvert is really important for creating that mental space. And then if you're extroverted, it's really important to have a support system and have people that are willing to hang out with you and do stuff with you. So like for instance, I know a lot of extroverts that have been in my life are like skateboarders. And if you know something about skateboarding, if you've ever been a skateboarder, you know people who skate. Typically they don't go out and skate alone. Most of them will hit up their friends and they'll all go skate together. That's an extrovert gaining their energy together. They don't even have to really be talking. They can just be literally like practicing and skateboarding together, and they're finding that energy within each other that they may need to gain the mental space. And a lot of people don't have comprehension of their own mental space, and that's a big part of like flooding and coming to an existence where You feel like I think one thing that Chris pointed out was basically like there's times in life where you're gonna feel like nothing matters and this is the end and nobody cares and I should just end it and everyone would be better. And a lot of humans have those thoughts, but it's important to understand that those thoughts are going to pass and fade, and that you're going to reach happiness again, and then you might fall right back into it, and it's a pattern. But in the be all end all, taking baby steps to learn how to avoid that feeling and learn how to get away from that feeling and get out of that hole is the best thing you can do for your neurological pathway. So a lot of people will reach that and be like, I think the biggest time to worry if your friend is going through depression or something like that is when they don't say anything. So like if they're coming to you and talking to you and saying, hey, I just want to end it all or whatever, it's going to be really overwhelming for you, and you're going to feel like you really have to be there and you really have to be responding or giving them ultimatums of like you're a good person, you're this and this and this and this. But actually most of the time what a depressed person needs is you to just listen and hear it out, and be there, you know. And if they're reaching out to you, that's a good thing. That's a really good thing, because then you can start taking the steps towards, and what's important at that point is eventually there's going to be a point where they're not in their depressive state. And you're like, oh, they're okay. It's going to be fine. Life's going to go on. But instead, those are the times when you're going to be like, hey, so let's approach how we can feel more comfortable when you're feeling this way. Let's approach getting you professional help. And it's okay to need that professional help. You know what I mean? Those are the moments when you're going to really want to get with that friend and be like, hey, this is the thing. Let's go do this. Everybody has hard days and everybody is going through something. But you can't be there for them if you don't have full mental space.
Right.
So,
yeah, I think they teach you my therapist told me this, they teach you in therapy school to be 80% there for yourself and then 20% focused on the other person. And that might seem like a lot to be focused on yourself, but you can't be there for the other person if you're not there for yourself. So, yep.
And for anyone in here that is enjoying this podcast and they really like the vibe we provide, there's a much more dense, shorter version kind of what we do from an actual professional who's a life coach and a therapist that Michael showed me originally. It's called The Angry Therapist. You can follow him on Instagram. You can go to a Spotify, Apple Music, whatever it may be. And he does basically 10-minute episodes covering different subjects that for me, like I listen to it and I don't know that I need it. And then I hear it and I'm like, wow, that was like really nice to hear.
That happens to me a lot.
My favorite part about it is that I can be sitting there and I'm at work and I'm like listening to music and I'm like, I don't want to listen to music for the moment, and I'll listen to one episode and that 10 minutes is good and I absorb it and then I go back to music. I don't have to sit and listen to them for an entire hour or anything like that. It's just a quick and easy refresher or refreshing feeling to be like, oh yeah, like this is a really good point that he makes, or this is something I'm going through that I can relate to, or I've been through that before and this is a good perspective to have on that. So anyone that's mentally struggling, and you can go to YouTube and find Confide Cast on YouTube through my YouTube channel. Every episode we do, we just put it raw and uncut onto YouTube, and they're all titled based on what they are, so that if you're like struggling with a certain thing or you need a reminder of something, or it just makes you feel comfortable to listen to specifically us speaking on these things, those are there for you guys to be able to listen to at any point in time that you want to. But if you want something more shorter and to the point and easier to take in, especially if you don't have a ton of mental space, The Angry Therapist is an excellent listen.
Yeah, he advertised himself as therapy in a shot glass, and I feel like that's pretty appropriate.
If there's anyone else in chat that has any questions or anything,
yeah, throw them out. What's up, Frankie? How you doing, Jinx?
How you doing? Close everything out. Being an introverted too is weird. I like coexisting and people watch and read people's emotions and feelings to help them. It's weird. You're definitely not the only introverted too, I promise.
Yeah. I think I'm more introverted than extroverted 100%.
Do you know what your anagram is?
No, never done a test like that. Nope.
You should find out. I'll send you a link.
Okay.
I
would be
sent
down.
Raz his, and he felt attacked. He was like, "Dude, this is fucking like exposing." And
Yeah.
then I showed Pack and Jinx theirs, and then I showed them their song, and they both were about to cry. It's funny. It's a cool project. It's a cool music project that they did.
What's up, Amy? Oh, for sure, Megan. Yeah, I'll check it out. I will check it out. Yo, Ramsey, thank you for the honor bomb. Appreciate it. Glad you enjoy the podcast sessions. Enjoy making them too. It does take a lot of emotional space, but I think it's worth it, especially if people are enjoying it and they're gaining something from it, you know?
And coming off of that thing that
Me
Meg
too,
is
Amy.
talking about with the seasons and the that's a really cool art project that you can approach with
That is, yeah.
these processes too, because I remember I first got into the love languages, and the person that had showed them to me, I reached out and was like, "Yo, thank you for showing me this. This is awesome. This has been helping me a lot in my situation and my relationship with my wife, and all of this." And he was like, "Yeah, that's awesome, and it's also good to do it, like redo it every year or even every season, because they change." And I think a lot of people change through the seasons. So like,
Yeah.
I find that when I'm struggling the most with my depression is usually November, December.
Yeah.
And I don't know
Seasonal.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know
Yeah.
why. But when I'm struggling the most with sadness is definitely those holiday seasons, which is so weird because it's such a big like family time and everything like that.
Hmm.
Maybe that could be a trigger of it or whatever. But basically, for me, in November, December when it's cold outside, it could be I couldn't need more physical attention because it's cold, and that's a better time to receive that physical attention. But for some people that aren't primarily physical attention for love could want primarily physical attention when it is those seasons. And then when it's summertime and it's too hot to be like touching up on each other or whatever it may be, maybe you're not physical attention, maybe you're gifts now.
Right.
Or maybe when you reach Christmas season, gifts are what's important because it's Christmas, and that's what's going to be your
No,
primary.
that makes sense. I think we're too kind of like the introverted extroverted. I don't think anybody's 100% one way or another. I think I recharge a little bit of my energy through extroverted means sometimes, as well as I think most of the time it's definitely introverted. But the love language is kind of something similar. You know, I feel like humans are just too complicated to peg down to two love languages, and then that's it. That's what you feel all the time. So that makes sense that they wax and wane through the seasons, and there's different degrees of them. So
Right, and those introvert extrovert feelings can also change within the seasons. Like
yeah, exactly.
you can on Christmas time you could be a complete extrovert and really need to be around people, whereas summertime hits and you could just want to go swimming alone.
Exactly.
Who really knows? The only person that's going to be able to identify those parts of you and yourself is you. And in time, those things can change because you're older as well. You could be 50 years old and want different things than what you would have wanted at the age of 25. So
Exactly. Exactly. Cool, cool.
well, this has been a fun one.
Yeah, it's been great.
I enjoy the lightweight conversations. The heavier ones are
They're tough. I can
nice
imagine.
to bounce. It's nice to bounce away
Yeah.
from them.
I'm sure
Especially after the
we'll
last
have
one.
segments of heavier ones from the stuff that we talk about. But yeah, I get that.
Yeah, I think at some point we'll approach boundaries pretty soon.
I'd be down for that. Yeah, because I've had to implement that in my life more recently. So, and sometimes it works positively. Now I feel like I have a better relationship with people that are closer to me, and then other times it does never. I don't think it ever turns out negatively, but it sometimes it turns out in the sense that you have to cut some people out. So
Before we close out, couple things. Anyone that's in here in chat right now, we didn't really give any homework this time or anything like
No.
that. Any challenges? If I could provide a challenge right now for everyone, it will be to go on to Spotify and put on this playlist music that has helped you with mental health in any way, shape, or form, whether it helps you feel anger or helps you feel your sadness or helps you get out of your sadness and feel happier, whatever it may be. This is a mental health playlist that we created on Spotify. And although I think we're on episode 7 of the podcast, and we have almost 300 songs, which is 19 hours of music on our mental health playlist on Spotify, which is incredible to see so many people adding to this playlist. And if you've already added to it, add more. You know, if you're listening to a song and it's making you feel some type of way, just throw it on the playlist. You'd be like, you're providing a small amount of help to so many people that are listening to this playlist that you don't even think about. You're not even you don't comprehend, hey, like, yeah, this is helping someone, and this is something that I can do to push this whole thing forward. And then outside of that, I would say anyone that hasn't liked Team Confide's page, definitely do that. Huge, important concept. It helps us out a lot as a team. And we have 2 closed groups for Confide. One is our actual closed group that's dedicated to Confide content, and then the other one is for live stream sharing. So if you have other streamers that you like to watch and you want to share their stream into a group, that's kind of like the stream spam group. Or if you're interested in finding new streamers, it's a good spot to go, where a lot of Confide people join up. Groups are a really big part of our community, and the Team Confide group is really important to me because as we become more active with this group and start pushing it forward, which is what's happening as we go, basically, if someone has a need to fill a space or a void with whatever it may be, right? Like if you're like, hey, this is a topic I want to hear on the podcast, or hey, I really need people to talk to right now, this is a group that's really good for that. And now I'm going through and deleting a bunch of live streams that were shared that I didn't realize happened. I thought that we had post approval on.
Of course.
But don't share live streams to the Team Confide fans. There is a Team Confide stream sharing group for you to share live streams to. Outside of that, just clips are okay and content is okay. Keep it Confide related. But anyone that's interested in that and likes what we're doing as a team or wants other streamers to follow, Team Confide has 7 members right now, and we are still in the process of growing. We haven't reached our max capacity yet.
Right.
So definitely go like the page and join the group, and we appreciate everyone that was here and took the time to listen to this today. And we love you guys, and none of you are alone. And we'll be doing another episode on Sunday, probably.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
And we will see you guys there.
Hell yeah.
Other than that, do you have anything?
I don't.
Cool. Well, we're gonna close it out then. I don't have anything else. Just add music to the Spotify and go out and show someone some love today.
Exactly. Stay safe, fam.